I wasn't even awake when I found out that the lake on my ranch, my lake, was listed for sale. It was my neighbor Rick who sent me the real estate flyer. No subject line. Just an image, a photo of my lake, captured in morning light, with bold letters across the top, tranquil private oasis, now available. My first reaction was confusion. I rubbed my eyes and stared harder at the listing. Then I saw the name under Property Republic. My blood went cold. Karen Bellamy. HOA President. Real estate agent. Queen of passive-aggressive power plays. I knew she didn't like me. Ever since her HOA subdivision cropped up on the eastern edge of my property, she'd been trying to rope me into their absurd little kingdom of bylaws and lawn inspections. I'd refused, of course. My ranch wasn't part of any HOA. I had the original deed from 1932 to prove it. But Karen didn't like being told no. So she made her move. The flyer claimed the lake was formerly HOA common area, now up for public bidding. It described it as unused land with community potential. I laughed out loud at the phrasing. This was no forgotten pond. This was a 100-acre spring-fed lake, the heart of my property, and had been in my family since my great-grandfather homesteaded here. The flyer listed an open house for Saturday. That Saturday. I was there an hour early. I didn't come with threats. I didn't come with a lawyer. I came with a thermos of coffee and a manila envelope containing every document proving my ownership of the land, the water, and the air around it. The open house was surreal. Realtors walking around with brochures. Potential buyers sipping lemonade. A smiling Karen in a sun hat, gesturing across the water like it was hers to give away. I waited until she started her little speech about revitalizing the lakeside for the community. Then I walked to the center of the crowd, opened the envelope, and pulled out my deed. This lake, I said calmly, is not for sale. Because it's mine. Karen's smile faltered for half a second, then came back twice as fake. Sir, this is private property. You're trespassing, she chirped, the way some people talk to dogs who've tracked mud onto the rug. Trespassing? I raised the deed. Karen, this is my land. She turned to the crowd. Security. Someone call the police. This man is attempting to disrupt a legal showing. And she did call the cops. I watched her dial them herself, right there on the dock. But what Karen didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that this wasn't my first chess move. Because last month, at a quiet little auction Karen had no clue was happening, I bought the neighboring plot, the one that includes the only road leading to the lake. Public access? Not anymore. I let the deputies come. I showed them the documents. The title. The maps. The coordinates. The county's stamp. And when they nodded and said, "You're good," I turned to Karen with a smile of my own. "You want to sell lakeside access, Karen?" I said. "Too bad. I just fenced off the driveway. Guess your community retreat just became a landlocked fantasy." She screamed something unintelligible as I walked back to my truck. But this wasn't over. Not even close. Next came the lawsuits. And then came the fence. By Monday morning, the fence was up. It wasn't anything fancy, just sturdy posts, galvanized wire, and a fresh coat of warning signs. Private property, and no trespassing, trespassers will be prosecuted. But it ran precisely where it needed to, across the old dirt road Karen's HOA used to access what they were calling the Lake District. Now, it ended at my property line. A clean, sharp line. The kind even satellite images couldn't ignore. By noon, Karen had called the police again. When the sheriff's deputy arrived, he was the same one from Saturday's open house. He stepped out of his cruiser, looked at the fence, then looked at me. "Mr. Grayson," he said, tipping his hat, "I take it this is the newly acquired parcel?" "Yup," I said, holding up the deed with the fresh ink still drying. He scratched his head. "Well, she says you're blocking off emergency access." I laughed. "To a lake that doesn't have public status and never did?" He sighed, muttered something about wasting taxpayer resources, and walked back to his car. Karen stood behind him near the cul-de-sac, fuming, her phone pressed to her ear, probably dialing her lawyer or maybe just screaming into the void. She didn't come back that day. But the emails started. By Wednesday, I had received no fewer than 9 letters from the HOA, each one thicker than the last, each one citing different violations, complaints, and communal disruption reports. My mailbox became a monument to their desperation. But none of it stuck. Why? Because their jurisdiction ended 200 feet before my land even began. Then came the funniest part, the HOA board called an emergency town hall meeting. Karen, standing like a general in front of a whiteboard, pointed to a giant printed map with highlighter marks and post-it notes. Her solution? A vote to eminent domain my land. I only found out because one of the board members, Harold, a soft-spoken widower with a decent heart, left a message on my answering machine. "You didn't hear it from me, John," he said, "but you might want to come to the town hall tonight." Karen's, well, she's lost it. So I showed up. Not with lawyers. Not with sheriffs. Just me, my boots, and a folder full of receipts. Karen didn't see me until halfway through her speech about community assets being reclaimed for the greater good. She was waving her arms around like a deranged professor at a conspiracy chalkboard. "Karen," I said, stepping into the light, "what's the legal precedent for reclaiming property that never belonged to you?" The room fell silent. Karen froze. "Mr. Grayson," she said through clenched teeth. "This is a private meeting." "Right," I said, pulling a rolled-up blueprint from my folder and spreading it out across the nearest table. "So let me make this simple. Here's the county map. Here's my parcel. Here's the fence line. You know what's not on here? Any mention of HOA access to the lake. Or a community development plan. Or, well, anything that remotely suggests you had the right to list my lake for sale." Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. "And before you start talking about legal rights," I added, "maybe tell your buyers why their Lakeview property just lost all its water access." Because oh yes, 3 homes had already been sold based on lake frontage. And now? Their docks led to dry grass. I could see the panic set in on Karen's face. The HOA had just realized it wasn't me who was going to be sued. It was them. And I hadn't even played my ace yet. The best part about revenge isn't the fire. It's the freeze. Not the shouting, not the lawsuits, not even the fence. It's the silence after the storm, when the ones who caused it finally realized they lost. And not by accident. By design. That was Thursday. 3 days after I blocked access to the lake, Karen's open house buyers started calling the HOA office demanding refunds. One even posted on the community message board, "This feels like a scam. I bought a lakeside lot and now I've got a view of someone's fence." But I wasn't finished. Because while Karen was busy spinning stories, I had been busy gathering facts. You see, when I bought that neighboring lot at auction last month, the one that gave me full control of lake access, I also bought something else. Karen's lot. It was a foreclosed parcel she hadn't paid taxes on in over a year. Quietly listed. Easy to miss. Unless you know where to look. And I knew exactly where to look. On Friday morning, I drove out to that little patch of land. It wasn't much, just a bare lot on the outer edge of the subdivision. No house. No utilities. But it was hers. Or rather, it used to be. Now it was mine. And the only thing it connected to was the lake. Which meant she no longer had access. Not even as a resident. Not even to stand on the shore. I posted the sign that morning, "Private property, no access without permission." The next day, Karen showed up in person. She didn't knock. She didn't scream. She just stood there, staring at the sign like it had insulted her personally. "You can't do this," she finally whispered. I tilted my head. "Did you think the lake was yours to sell because you printed a brochure?" Her lip trembled. "The board, the buyers, the money's already moved. This was a community investment. I stepped forward slowly, not with anger, but something worse for her. Calm. Karen, this isn't Monopoly. You don't get to slap for sale on things you don't own and hope no one notices. I didn't play Monopoly. I pulled out the deed to her lot, the official one. I played escrow. And I won. She looked at the document like it was written in fire. And then, finally, the mask cracked. She screamed. Loud. Ugly. Unhinged. The kind of scream you let out when you realize you've lost a game you didn't even understand the rules to. Neighbors peeked out. Someone recorded it. Someone else called the HOA hotline. But I didn't flinch. Because by now, the damage was done. Buyers were walking away. The board was scrambling. Contractors quit mid-project. And Karen's empire of clipboards and control was crumbling faster than her fake open house lemonade stand. Later that week, the HOA's lawyer issued a statement. The president acted without full authorization. We're investigating. But it was too late. The buyers wanted out. The money vanished. And Karen? Evicted. Turns out, when you don't pay your dues on time, and the land you built your lies on is no longer yours, the HOA has no choice but to show you the same door you were trying to slam on everyone else. They say revenge is best served cold. But sometimes, it tastes even better when it's signed, notarized, and filed under poetic ownership. And that, my friend, is how one fake ad led to a real eviction. The day after Karen's meltdown, the lake was eerily still. No contractors. No board members. No self-important realtors snapping photos. Just silence, broken only by the occasional ripple from the wind or a heron coasting low over the water. You'd think things would quiet down after a public embarrassment like hers. But people like Karen? They don't retreat. They regroup. And that's exactly what she did. By Monday morning, I received an official-looking envelope marked urgent. Inside? A letter from the HOA's new temporary board, demanding access to the lake to reassess potential future community use. They used phrases like adjacent responsibility and unified neighborhood enhancement. It was a fancy way of saying, we still think we can control your land. I called my lawyer. Tell them to go fish, he said, laughing. In someone else's pond. But I didn't just want to ignore it. I wanted to end the idea at its root. Because this wasn't about just Karen anymore. It was about the culture she'd created, the entitlement, the arrogance, the assumption that enough noise could substitute for law. So I got to work. First, I expanded the fence, twice as high, with motion-activated cameras and solar lights. It wasn't just a boundary anymore. It was a fortress. Second, I built a dock. A real one. Wide, smooth planks, reinforced beams. The kind of dock that says ownership even from across the water. I added a signpost at the end that read, Private Waters. Keep out. But it was the third step that really twisted the knife. I turned the lake into a conservation area. Through an old connection in the county environmental office, I applied for, and received, protected private ecosystem status. The lake was now officially a wildlife preservation zone. No swimming. No fishing. No boats. No HOA events. Not without explicit permits. Not without my signature. Which meant even if they wanted to hold their so-called community water walk or that ridiculous kayak yoga class they had posted about pre-sale. It was now a violation of county ordinance. Karen's HOA wasn't just powerless now, it was liable. Word spread fast. Some of the same neighbors who once rallied around her began knocking on my door. Quietly. Cautiously. I could see the shame in their eyes. We didn't know, one of them said. She told us the lake was a forgotten zone. Community surplus. Did she also tell you I've owned it since 1996? I replied. And that it's been listed on the county's private land ledger for 30 years? Blank stares. embarrassed smiles. "Look," I said, "I'm not here to punish anyone. But you should all start asking questions before you follow someone who prints her own maps and sells property she's never set foot on." The board held another emergency meeting. This time in the clubhouse instead of someone's living room. Karen wasn't invited. But she showed up anyway. Hair disheveled, clothes wrinkled, she stood in the doorway as the new president, Harold, the same soft-spoken board member who warned me earlier, tried to conduct the meeting. "You think you can just push me out?" she yelled. "You think any of you would even be here if I hadn't fought for this neighborhood?" "You fought for power," Harold said quietly. "Not people." And for the first time, no one clapped for her. No one backed her up. Just the sound of her footsteps as she stormed out. But that wasn't the last I heard of Karen Bellamy. Because 3 days later, I got a letter. Not from the HOA. Not from a lawyer. From Karen herself. Handwritten. It read, "You may think you've won, John. But there are still ways to make your life very uncomfortable. You took my land. You ruined my reputation. Now I'll take what matters most to you. Piece by piece." I stared at that letter for a long time. Then I locked it in the drawer with the others. Because now it wasn't just about the lake. Now it was personal. And Karen was about to learn something she'd never understood in her world of pamphlets and policy. You can't bully a man off his own land. Especially not when he's got nothing left to lose, and every reason to fight back. Karen's letter stayed in my desk drawer for 3 days. Not because I was afraid of it, but because I knew what it meant. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And Karen Bellamy always kept her promises, when it came to petty vengeance. The first move came fast. That Friday morning, my mailbox was gone. Just gone. Post snapped clean like it had been kicked, the metal box twisted into a shallow ditch. I walked it to the sheriff's office myself. They took photos. Logged it as vandalism. I didn't have to say Karen's name, they already knew. Her name was on at least 4 other recent complaints. That night, I replaced the mailbox. Welded steel. Reinforced. Buried in concrete. Let's see them kick that. But I knew it wouldn't stop there. Karen's power wasn't brute force. It was whispers. Forms. Petty filings. The slow strangulation of someone's peace using red tape and rumor. So I made a list. I called it the retaliation list. It wasn't for revenge. It was for defense. Every time something happened, I added it. Logged the time. Took a photo. Called the sheriff, not to complain, but to document. Saturday, a sudden inspection from the county zoning office. Apparently, someone reported unlicensed sewage treatment activity. The guy left laughing when I showed him the completely legal composting system. Sunday, a notice taped to my door, no envelope, no return address, accusing me of dangerous wildlife harboring. Because my ranch had deer. And birds. And, according to the letter, a suspicious fox. Monday, someone poured gravel across my driveway entrance, blocking my truck in. That one? I traced. Thanks to my motion cameras, I caught a blue Prius rolling up around 3 a.m., driver hooded, dumping 5 bags of contractor gravel. Guess whose HOA-registered vehicle matched the make and model? Karen's niece. Same car she used for community errands. The retaliation was subtle. Smart. Vicious. But it was also desperate. Because what Karen didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had quietly been preparing for a much bigger move. A public one. Remember that little lake I protected with the wildlife designation? Well, I partnered with the local conservation trust. And we launched something the HOA never expected. The Oak Hollow Conservation Walk. A limited, ticketed trail system around the far end of the lake. Open once a month to local students, veterans, and charity groups. All legally hosted on my land, with signage, insurance, permits, and supervision. I made sure the press came for the launch. Channel 8 ran the headline, "Once contested waters become local sanctuary thanks to lone rancher." The article mentioned the HOA's past attempt to rezone the lake without clear ownership. Karen's name wasn't in the headline, but it was in the footnotes. And that was enough. The next week, her house went up for sale. Quietly. No flyer. No open house. She didn't even list it through her own real estate license. But the damage? Already done. Because someone else had started asking questions. Not the sheriff. Not the HOA board. Not even me. No, this time it was a quiet man in a blue suit who showed up on my property one Thursday morning with a leather case and a federal badge. "Mr. Grayson," he asked. I nodded slowly. "I'm Agent Torres. Mind if I ask a few questions about your neighbor's recent business dealings?" My stomach dropped, and then lit on fire. Because if Karen Bellamy thought I was her only problem, she was about to learn a very painful truth. When you fake the sale of land you don't own, you don't just get evicted. You get investigated. Agent Torres wasn't what I expected. No sunglasses. No fedora. Just a guy with a notebook, calm voice, and a gaze that could read lies like street signs. He stepped lightly on my porch like he didn't want to spook the boards beneath his feet. "You were the original owner of the lake property, correct?" I nodded. "Since the late 90s. Bought it from the Moss family when their boys left for college." "And you still have the deed, tax records, plat map, and purchase logs?" I opened the folder I'd prepared a month ago, already knowing this day might come. Everything, chronologically organized. Even the notarized photos from before Karen's little open house stunt. He flipped through it silently. Page by page. Didn't say much. But when he got to the flyer, the real estate one with my lake being sold by not my HOA, he whistled low and tapped the corner with his pen. "She claimed this was an used HOA property?" "Repeatedly," I said. "Publicly. And this open house was monetized?" I nodded. "She collected deposit checks. Told buyers lake access was guaranteed. Even printed pamphlets with a Phase 2 development plan." He scribbled something. "We've got 3 complaints and already from folks who bought into the development under false pretenses. The issue is, none of them were officially filed until the lake access disappeared." I folded my arms. People only get mad when the dream dries up. Torres gave me a look that said, "You're not wrong." Then he asked the question I hadn't anticipated. "Did she know, Mr. Grayson?" "Know what?" "That you'd bought her lot." I paused. "No," I said. "Not until the sign went up. She thought she still had leverage." Torres closed the folder and gave me a slow nod. "She's been under informal review for a while, questionable filings, some shady paperwork tied to her brokerage license. But this lake stunt? It might be enough to move things federal." I didn't smile. Not yet. Because I've learned something over the last 2 months. People like Karen don't break with evidence. They break with exposure. And exposure was coming. 2 weeks later, a video leaked. Someone had recorded Karen at that open house, sipping wine, giving a tour, saying, "It's technically an escrow, but we have access. The HOA owns the perimeter, so the lake is essentially ours." It hit social media first. Then the news. She tried to claim it was doctored. But Torres' office released their own report, highlighting property misrepresentation, fraudulent real estate practices, and misuse of HOA funds. Karen Bellamy lost her license. 2 board members resigned. The HOA issued a full public apology. But none of that was the moment. No. The moment was when Karen returned one last time. Not to fight. Not to scream. But to look. I was out on the dock with a mug of coffee, watching the sunrise ripple over the lake surface. She pulled up in a beige sedan, no more Lexus. No more sun hat. No clipboard. She stood behind the fence, hands in her jacket pockets. I didn't think you'd win, she said quietly. I didn't think you'd dig your own grave. She gave a hollow laugh. It was never about the lake, you know. It was about control. The illusion of order. Funny, I said. All it took was one fake open house to unravel the illusion. We stood in silence for a moment. Birds chirped. The lake lapped softly against the shore. I lost everything, she whispered. You happy? I took a long sip of coffee. No. But I'm satisfied. She left without another word. And that was it. The emails stopped. The fences stayed. The lake returned to peace. But I kept the deed framed above my fireplace. Not as a trophy. As a warning. Because in a world where people think they can own what isn't theirs, sometimes the only thing stronger than an HOA is one man with a line in the dirt, and the courage to defend it.